Hello, I am Hatu of Asian Agribees. Welcome to another Asian Agribees podcast. One of the biggest risk factors for disease transmission in farms is transport vehicles. Nevertheless, it remains one of the often ignored aspects of biosecurity programs. Today, Isa Q. Tan speaks with Mike Button, a global consultant on veterinary health, about transportation biosecurity, the problems concerning it, its impacts, and how producers can better and consistently implement it.
Hello, Mike. Thank you for joining me in today's podcast. Before we start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm Mike Button. I am an independent consultant in animal health and biosecurity. I have many years' experience across all of Southeast Asia and many other areas of this small or large globe as we look at it. Obviously, we have greater challenges coming every year, and I have great interest in trying to make the farms safe from current challenges such as African swine fever, avian influenza, salmonella, etc.
Thanks for that. Let me dive in. First, I want to ask you about what biosecurity measures are currently in place for livestock transportation.
Okay, that's a good start because the importance of biosecurity for all farm vehicles cannot be stressed enough, as they provide an excellent vector through which disease can be spread. And this is particularly important for vehicles that transport livestock and feed, but also for vehicles which visit farms in general. Many farms will have a minimum amount of biosecurity because they know the vehicle should be done. So they will spray from the wheels when they arrive. In a lot of instances, very poorly done. In some areas, it's done quite well, which we'll look at later on. But the problems that are associated with it, vehicles can go between many farms, and we have what we call middlemen, which are people that transport the livestock, which aren't affiliated to either the farm or the processing factory at the end. And they can be a rule unto themselves, which take a bit of controlling.
Okay, so you mentioned that many of the vehicles and trucks are traveling between farms. So how should these trucks and equipment be cleaned between farms?
Well, in general, what we would say is that a vehicle going to and from a farm should be cleaned and disinfected between each farm or factory. What that means, if it comes to a farm to collect livestock, it takes it to the destination, which could be an abattoir, it could be further processing plants, it could be another farm. But before it goes to another farm, it is washed and cleaned. I stress cleaned and disinfected because everything needs cleaning properly for a disinfectant to work ideally on the surface.
Okay. So it should not be just a haphazard cleaning, yeah? You said disinfectants will not work if the surface is not really.
I find, and this is not just in Southeast Asia, it is all over the world. Many people seem to think that disinfectants are some wonder product, the answer from heaven, which is going to solve all their problems. They're not, they're an aid, and there are many things that can stop disinfectants working. And a lorry covered in organic matter can neutralize a disinfectant. We also have a temperature, and many disinfectants reduce their effectiveness in cold weather. Some actually don't work when it gets very cold. So this needs to be taken into consideration when we're looking at how we work on vehicles, because the vehicle is outside, and it's okay if we disinfect inside the livestock building. That can be slightly warmer than the outside temperature. So the same disinfectant or the disinfectant procedure is not necessarily the same inside a building as we would do outside.
Okay, so you mentioned that you've had extensive experience in this region. Over the time that you've consulted with farms here, how do you see producers, particularly in this region, looking at first biosecurity in general and specifically live transport biosecurity? What has been your experience?
Historically, I would say biosecurity has been treated as something we talk about but don't practice properly. Or if there is pressure on our business, we can cut it out because it is a cost, and we don't see a direct benefit from it. Unfortunately, we have seen some major disease outbreaks over the last 5 or 6 years, especially with African swine fever and avian influenza, for example. That has focused people's minds more on doing what we would call effective biosecurity. But humans are humans, and when they see the disease in their eyes waning or less of a risk, they are reverting back to norm and not doing their effective biosecurity the same. And then they wonder why the disease re-emerges on their farms. This is quite common. I have seen many cases of this right through the whole of Asia.
But do you feel that, with ASF, more producers have learned? And also with avian influenza, do you feel that producers, the newer producers particularly, are learning about the importance of this?
Yes, they are, and certainly on all the presentations I've given every time I'm over in Southeast Asia, people are more keen to understand the reasons for biosecurity now. Unfortunately, it's always good to have something like ASF to focus somebody's mind on it because they can see the direct cost. Unfortunately, we still get many people who think they can make money by not doing things, and as we say, we have a saying in Europe, I don't know if it translates, where we cut corners. It means people want to find an easier way of doing things. That is human nature, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Also, what is happening is the industries are changing. So we are losing a lot of our little small backyard family farms and are being concentrated more into larger intensive farms. These farms have more livestock, they're more professional, so their attitude towards biosecurity is a lot more professional and they're doing a better job.
Okay, so focusing now on transport biosecurity, where do the mistakes and the problems happen?
With the biggest vector for disease we have called the human being. um, the mistakes are still that vehicles are not being cleaned properly. Only recently I'm trying to think where it was, in China, I was watching lorries arrive at a farm, and that was great. They had gates of security and everything. And the person was receiving the lorries, and he knew he had to spray them with disinfectant. He was, but it was more of a superficial thing. They're not getting into the areas that need cleaning properly, which is into the wheel arches that carry organic matter and can drop off and carry muck around. And also, people forget the driver. The driver jumps in and out of lorries at various different farms. The cabs can be dirty. He can carry disease on his boots and clothing. Yeah, the driver needs training. The driver should have site-specific clothing to put on when he arrives at farms if the vehicle has to go in. The other very common thing is that people allow too many vehicles into their production units. What I mean by that is non-essential ones. And we see many times that workers, cars, motorbikes, scooters just ride into the farms without any check and cleaning. These have travelled on the roads coming down to the farms and can pick up disease and carry it into the farm. They seem to think that the workers or the managers are immune from carrying disease. So they'll stop outside vehicles, but they don't stop their own for some reason. So and we're talking here about livestock transportation, but this also applies, as we said, to farm workers, vets visiting the farm. Feed lorries. That's another big area for transmission of disease. It's the feed lorry itself from coming from the feed mill. On the poultry side, chick lorries, egg lorries, these sort of things. Anything that has to go into the farm should be minimised. So ideally, we would have everything park outside the farm and only essential vehicles go into the farm. And those essential vehicles should be cleaned and disinfected. And as for people going in, it's the same. We don't just clean them going in, we need to clean them coming out, because we don't want to take anything in, but we don't want to bring anything out either. So if there's a disease risk in that farm, it needs cleaning and disinfecting again before it leaves, so it's not taking something to its neighbours and spreading it through the countryside.
Okay. Well, you mentioned some of the things that have to be done, but at the very minimum, what standards should farms or producers companies have for vehicles and equipment used in livestock transportation so that they can minimize these risks?
The absolute minimum is they should have a farm gate, a barrier. It doesn't need to be anything expensive. they need, as we said, minimize the vehicles going in. The vehicles that go in need to be checked, they need to be washed, and they need to be disinfected. That should be the minimum. Yeah,
That's the order. That's the order that they should be done.
that's the order. And on that, there should also be a record kept of where that vehicle has come from and who washed it. Because if there's a disease outbreak, we need traceability. And this is one thing that falls down. Some people spray vehicles, they have no idea where it's come from or where it's going next. So as with food traceability, the vehicle should have traceability as well.
Okay. And do you feel that this should be easy enough for farms to be able to do, or would they be needing anything to get this done?
Yeah, anything extra is a pain in the rear end to a farmer. Sometimes these things are essential, and we're talking here of bare minimum, and I'm trying to be realistic. We know some farms won't put everything on, but it's their livelihood, their business that can be affected. So if it's a larger organization, then they should appoint a biosecurity coordinator. Okay, there should be one person responsible for biosecurity. Where that falls down a lot is people appoint a biosecurity supervisor or coordinator, but they also give them other jobs. So biosecurity then comes down the list of priorities for it. It is a main job. That person should be responsible for maintaining any records, and importantly, all the staff, whether they're existing staff or new staff, should be regularly trained why they're doing it. If people understand why they're doing it and own it, it will get implemented. If it's enforced on them and they are just told to do it, they will do the bare minimum and things will get missed and neglected. And it's much the same if we're using third-party hauliers. They are separate business people. It's their profits. They want to do as many journeys as they can in their lorries with as little cost. But at the end of the day, if they have no customers, their lorries aren't going to run. And they have to understand the risk that they could bring to a farm by not cleaning and disinfecting their vehicles between journeys. Yeah, I remember several years ago, and this was dealing with an avian influenza outbreak in the United States. And it was a cleaning company who went between the farms cleaning out at the end of the cycle. And this guy in a meeting said to me, "Mike, do you mean I've got to clean and disinfect my equipment between farms?" I said, "Yes, of course. You're going from cleaning one farm out to another." "Gee, no, that's going to cost me money." That was the attitude. And that is the attitude, unfortunately, of a lot of people. So they have to understand why they should clean it and wash it. Then they will do it. Yeah.
So it's important for them to understand that if you don't do it, there's also going to be a certain cost to you, which might even be bigger than what you would have spent in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at the billions of dollars African swine fever has caused through Southeast Asia in the last 4 years, a lot of that could have been prevented, even in China, which was the biggest one, by monitoring the transport and effective biosecurity and not breaking regulations in the movement of pigs and things. That spread of the disease could have been a lot less than we saw it. And it's the same in many other countries. If we look what's happened in the Philippines, how ASF has spread. Oh, I wonder why it's hopped across the islands. Oh, funnily enough, someone's taken some pigs there they shouldn't have done, It's easily traced.
And that is why it's continuing, despite all the.
Yep.
Yeah, it's continuing. Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's the same. We've seen that up in Vietnam. We see it again in China, where it breaks out again on farms that have cleaned and disinfected and been empty. They've either brought the wrong stocking or they've moved or broken biosecurity regulations. Very recently in Vietnam, I was dealing with a pig unit there, and it was the same thing. It was the biosecurity that had been reduced because their perceived level of risk had gone.
Can you describe to me what needs to be done to a vehicle, for example, that is coming into a farm and maybe picking up animals and then it's going again?
If it's a livestock vehicle, before that vehicle comes to that farm, it should have been thoroughly washed, cleaned, and disinfected. And that process isn't a quick one. And in cooler climates, it is better doing that in a covered area. Many companies are now building washing bays, if you like. They're buildings. A lorry drives in, the door shuts, it's in a warm environment. So the vehicle is washed. It removes as much organic matter as possible, and that can be done using a cleaner. We have foaming cleaners around on the market, which help remove all the organic matter, slime, and various things. It is then washed, and it is clean. It is now allowed to dry, and that's the important thing. Allow it to dry, then apply the disinfectant. Disinfectants work better on dry surfaces. If you're applying it to wet one, it's diluting it on the moisture. Allow the disinfectant to work, dry, the vehicle goes to the farm. When it arrives at the farm, because it's been traveling on local roads, there should be a reception for it. And that means that there's a barrier. It could be just a bar, it can be a gate, whatever. There should be some form of extra biosecurity to that farm where they can spray a disinfectant through appropriate methods, either knapsacks, pressure washers, up into the wheel arches and around. The driver's cab between farms is the same as the outside. That should be cleaned and disinfected. Quite easy. It can be swept out. It can be scraped from the pedals. All organic matter, muck removed. And the cab just sprayed lightly with a disinfectant, and that's effective. The driver should also, if he's a livestock driver, or even if it's a feed driver, should ideally not be wearing the same clothes he's used to go or handled other pigs with. So there should be clean clothes or appropriate clothing on top. If he has to get out at the farm, then site-specific clothing should be there for that driver as well. And that includes his boots, clean boots for the farm, and maybe some overalls to go on him.
It seems very meticulous and tedious, but as you said, very important to get done.
The attention to the vehicles should be no different than the attention they're giving to the livestock building. Would you put young weaned pigs into a dirty building? No. Would you put a breeding stock into a dirty building where old stock have been before? No. Then why would you put them in a lorry? The same. Would you walk into a high-end breeding unit with boots covered in manure, overalls covered in manure from another farm? No. Then why put a lorry the same? That's the way to look at it. It is no different.
Because most likely
it is a risk to the farm, but it's also because it's going from the farm and to other places. It's not only a risk to the farm; it's a risk to other farms and other systems that can spread the disease, as we talked about with African swine fever, around the country very easily.
So it's even riskier. I mean, the risks are actually much bigger with transportation.
We're talking here mainly of pigs, of course, but even if we look at poultry, it's the same. You wouldn't go to breeder farms to collect fertile eggs without cleaning between the different farms. You wouldn't use a vehicle that's been to several farms to take day-old chicks to a farm because the risk of taking the disease in. It works on everything. The feed lorries are the same. One of the big spreaders of disease, and one of the things I'm looking at a lot at the moment in Southeast Asia, is the spread of salmonella. And the risk through feed deliveries is enormous, not just in the raw materials, but the lorries. And it's the same thing. They come from various farms. They're independent drivers, and I've sat outside feed mills and seen these lorries goose up. Many of them are very dirty. The farmers haven't cleaned. They can go into a feed mill. And we know for some work that was done in the United States a few years ago, and I can't remember the exact number of pigs now, but a lorry driver standing on the edge of an intake area in a feed mill and some feces from a farm dropping off and going into the intake bin with the wheat or corn, whatever, potentially spread African swine fever over something like 10, 15 farms by contaminating the food. So, it's all transport,
The consequences can be really great.
I mean, just because diseases like African swine fever and avian influenza on top of the list at the moment. It doesn't mean they've gone away. They haven't. There are many other things there which are affected by it. And some of the bacterial diseases, as we mentioned, salmonella is a big problem in livestock industry, and that is easily transmitted between people and vehicles the same.
Okay. Just going to the materials that are used to clean or to disinfect. Does it matter the type of materials you use?
Yes.
Okay.
Like with anything, when you wash, you want to wash the water you use needs to be the same water you would drink. Many people make the mistake of drawing water out of lagoons or dirty tanks, or basically you're just spreading liquid bacterial diseases all over your vehicle. The type of cleaner and disinfectant you use needs to be compatible to the vehicles. Okay, so there are some disinfectants which are effective but not suitable for using on lorries because they can be aggressive to rubber, which can destroy tires, it can destroy bake pipes. Other disinfectants can be corrosive to aluminium and things. So a lot of vehicles have aluminium bodies on them for the transportation. So you need to find a suitable disinfectant which is not corrosive to metals and rubber and things. Yeah, they might be effective in a footbath, but not the same on a
Okay.
on
So these
a
are
lorry.
things. Okay, so these are things that must be
Yeah.
considered as well,
Yeah, and the other one when we're talking of cleaning and disinfecting is if we're doing it properly by washing, with a cleaner, letting it dry, then disinfectant, the cleaner is compatible to the disinfectant. Some people will use one type of cleaner and a different type of disinfectant without checking, and they're not compatible, and that could not clean properly, can neutralize the disinfectant. Yeah.
I think you've given quite a bit of information and tips about how we can improve transportation biosecurity. But can I ask for a last word from you as per advice to producers? What advice would you give?
What advice would I give? Think of this is not a chore, it's your livelihood. And if in doubt, ask. There are many people out there that can help advise and set up a protocol for the farms. But don't do nothing. Okay, a little bit, even if it's just spraying disinfectant, is better than nothing. And ask questions. Excuse me. If a local haulier refuses to do, won't watch his vehicle, don't use him. Use another one. It's his livelihood, is your livelihood, but don't let one stop another. And minimize where your livestock is going. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
We hope you picked up many tips today to better implement transportation biosecurity in your operations. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to Asian Agribees podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or your favorite podcast platform. For more on Asia's animal protein industry, visit www.asian-agribees.com.